Welcome back to the David Pakman Show. I am Farron Cousins from Ring of Fire and Farron Balance, sitting in for David today. And don't forget, if you have enjoyed me, or honestly, even if you didn't, go check out my other channels. Again, you can find those at youtube.com/FarronBalanced and youtube.com/The Ring of Fire. And from even more from me, you can find me across social media, Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, at Farron Balanced. We still have a lot more to talk about today, so let's jump right into it. As we all know, the Trump administration is working overtime in order to try to kill the United States Department of Education. Elon Musk came out just a few days ago and announced that, hey, the DOE is dead. And of course, Republicans introduced legislation in January that would effectively kill the United States Department of Education, effective on December 31st of the year 2026, if that legislation passes. Right now, it's still in committee, has not gone to a floor vote, but the legislation exists, and of course, that's a big piece of the puzzle. Because Donald Trump as President of the United States, Elon Musk as co-president of the United States, I guess we'll call him, they cannot get rid of a government agency. The only way to do that is through the same kind of legislation that created it. And Republicans do have majorities in both the House and Senate, but their majority in the House is razor thin, so who knows if they'll be able to pass it. But in the meantime, the destruction of the Department of Education is continuing. They're doing it by moving people out of the department, basically reducing the staff to the point where it becomes dysfunctional, and then they're going to try to use that dysfunction as an excuse to get rid of it. It is this planned incompetence is what we need to look at it as. And of course, this was put in motion decades ago by Republican Grover Norquist. He said he wanted to shrink the government so small that you could drown it in a bathtub. And you do that by crippling these institutions from the inside out, and then using the dysfunction that you created to show the public, well, look how poor they are. Look how awful they are. The whole department is nothing but chaos. We need to get rid of it. And the public looks at it and says, well, yeah, you're right. It is doing pretty bad. Let's get rid of the department. And that's how you gain support for it. And right now, across the country, there is actually a decent amount of Republican support for getting rid of the U.S. Department of Education, which would be an unmitigated disaster here in the United States for everybody. But as per usual, nobody would suffer more from the destruction of the Department of Education than Donald Trump's own voters. A new report from Axios has revealed that, yes, indeed, red states would be hit the hardest if we got rid of the Department of Education. Here is what they wrote. States that voted for Trump last November, on average, use more federal funding in their education apportions than states that voted for the former Vice President Harris. That dependence is, in large part, because they're just lower wealth states and they don't have the same capacity to step in and make up that difference. Average federal spending in the 2021-2022 school year was 17% in Trump voting states, compared to 11% in states that voted for Harris. At 23%, Mississippi had the highest proportion of federal public school funding that school year, with South Dakota and Arkansas following with 22% each. New York, at 7%, had the lowest, but New York still spends $33,440 per student per year, while Mississippi only spends $12,390 per student per year. So New York, blue state, spends more per student than any other state in the country and still takes less from the federal government than every other state in the country to fund their education system. So, red states are going to take the biggest hit. But you may be thinking to yourself, Farron, they're just getting rid of the department. They're not getting rid of the funding. The funding just won't have to go through the DOE. It'll be sent out to the states directly. Sure. And who's going to look over their shoulders to make sure that they're actually spending it on education? because we're not going to have a Department of Education to do that, which is what they do now already. When these states, if the Department of Education is destroyed, right? When these states start getting this money from the federal government, because yes, I do think the federal government would still spend money. Nobody's looking over their shoulders to make sure it's actually going to education, because the states that need to be spending it on education are not just experiencing budget shortfalls in the education arena. They're experiencing budget shortfalls across the board, especially states like Mississippi, states like Arkansas, Alabama, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Oklahoma, Kansas. So when you have states that desperately need more money to continue to function, and they get this money, even though it's, you got to spend it on education, what they will do is they'll just pass a quick law that says any federal funding we received is now at the discretion of the governor of the state. And that governor can choose to reapportion funds to it, blah, blah, blah. We've seen it happen in the past. So suddenly the money they are getting from the federal government to bolster the schools doesn't go to the schools. You don't get Title I funding at all anymore, which of course is what's keeping a lot of these lower income red states afloat. So that would be gone already. So whatever federal funding you get is still going to be far less than what you're receiving now. The bottom line is that it's a disaster. Teachers will suffer. The children will suffer. Education overall is going to be destroyed in this country. And that's the plan. That is the goal. That is what they're trying to do here. And they don't care that the very people who put them in power are the ones who are going to suffer the most. Just like pretty much all of Donald Trump's other policies that are disproportionately affecting red states and his voters the most, and he simply doesn't care.
Well, I wrote a book after a long journey and a ton of work. I am really thrilled with how it turned out, and I hope you'll read it. The book is called The Echo Machine, and in a nutshell, it looks at how American politics got so broken, who has already figured out solutions, and how we can try to fix it and stop the terror of Trump for the next 4 years. With Trump winning this election, The Echo Machine couldn't be more relevant, not only a warning about how we got here, but also about what might be coming and how to prevent the worst outcomes. We've got to stay engaged. We need a plan, and that's what the book is about. There's a belief out there that unless you have corporate media behind you, you can't have a successful political book launch, that it's not possible. I think we can prove that wrong. Order The Echo Machine today at davidpakman.com/echo on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Audible, Kindle, anywhere that books, ebooks, and audiobooks are sold. You can also call any local bookstore and say, please order me The Echo Machine by David Pakman. Wherever you get the book, you'll get the free pre-order perks, including the signed book plate. Head to davidpakman.com/free book stuff after ordering.